liability, political liability everywhere, political 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 liability, state the government, political liability, political liability, House of Representative, political liability, political liability everywhere, political liability, political liability, our senators, political liability, political liability, our senators, political liability, political liability, our senators, political liability, political liability everywhere, political liability, political liability, our House of Reps, political liability everywhere, political liability, political liability in our government, political liability everywhere, political liability, political liability, political liability, political liability in the government house, political liability, political liability, our opposition party, political liability, political liability everywhere, political liability, political liability, our senators, political liability, political liability, our ministers, political liability, political liability, our senators, political liability, political liability, our ministers, political liability. Every day, sharing the money, every day, sharing the money, every day they share our money, our senators share our money, House of Reps share our money, our ministers share our money, our reps share our money, our ministers share our money, political liability, political liability, political liability every day, political liability, political liability, sharing our money, sharing our money, political liability, political liability, seat of government, political liability, political liability, presidency, political liability, everywhere, political liability, political liability, political liability, political liability, political liability, political liability, our senators, political liability, our senators, political liability, political liability, our ministers, political liability, political liability, political liability, sovereign, political liability, presidency, political liability, presidency, political liability, political liability, everywhere, political liability, House of Assembly, political liability, House of Senate, political liability, political liability, our commissioners, political liability, everywhere, political liability, sharing our money, sharing our money every day, political liability, political liability, political liability, our councillors, political liability, political liability, our chairman, political liability, political liability, everywhere, political liability, political liability, our senators, political liability, political liability, House of Reps, political liability, political liability, our senators, political liability, political liability, seat of government, political liability, political liability, everywhere, political liability, political liability, everywhere, political liability, political liability, seat of government, political liability, political liability, our seat of government, political liability, political liability, everywhere, political liability, political liability, our seat of government, political liability, political liability, everywhere, political liability, Political
Follow me.
liability. Our government
Follow me.
political liability. Political liability.
Back follow me. Back follow me.
Political liability.
Back follow me. Back follow me.
Political liability.
Back follow me.
Everywhere political liability. Political liability. Everywhere political liability. Political liability. Everywhere political liability. Political liability. Seat of government political liability.
Double type. Double type.
Political
Double type.
liability. Everywhere political liability.
Double type. Double type.
Political liability. Our ministers political liability. Political liability. Our senators political liability. Political liability. House of Reps
Follow me. Follow me.
political liability.
Follow me. Follow me.
Political liability. City government political
Double type.
liability.
Double type. Double type.
Political
Double
liability.
type. Double type.
City government political
Double
liability.
type. Guys, different. Forward.
Political
Double type.
liability. House of Assembly political liability. Political liability. Everywhere political
Double
liability.
type. Double type. Guys.
Political liability. Opposition party political liability. Political liability. Opposition party political liability.
Double type, guys.
Political liability. Everywhere political liability. 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 Political liability. Our seat of government political liability. Political liability. Our senators political liability. Political liability. House of Reps political liability. Political liability. House of Reps political liability.
Follow me.
Political liability. Our senators political liability. Political liability. City government political liability. Everywhere political liability. Political liability. Sharing our money 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 political liability. Everywhere political liability. Political liability, sharing our money. Political liability, sharing our money. Political liability, sharing our money. Political liability,
Hello,
everywhere.
Assalamualaikum.
Political liability.
Assalamualaikum.
Political liability, state or government. Political liability. Political liability, state or government. Political liability. Political, political, political liability. State or government. Political liability. State or government. Political liability.
बैक को फॉलो कर दो, मुझे बैक फॉलो करें.
Political liability. Political liability. State or government. Political liability. Political liability. State or government. Political liability. Political liability. Our senators. Political liability. Political liability. Our senators. Political liability.
Double dive.
Political liability. Our senators. Political liability. Political liability. State or government. Political liability. Political liability. State or government. Political liability. Political liability. Everywhere. Political liability. Political liability. Grassroots government. Political liability. Political liability. Our councillors. Political liability.
Hello.
Political liability. Our vice chairman. Political liability. Political liabilities. Our chairman. Political liabilities. Political liabilities. Our commissioner. Political liabilities. Political liabilities. House of Assembly. Political liabilities. Political liabilities. Political liability. Political liability. House of Senate. Political liability. Political liabilities. State or government.
sir, कहाँ गए हो?
Political liabilities. Political liabilities. Opposition party. Political liabilities. Political liabilities. Everywhere. Political liabilities. Political liabilities. Everywhere. Political liabilities. Political liabilities. Sharing our money. Political liabilities. Political liabilities. Sharing our money. Political liabilities. Political liabilities. Sharing our money. Political liability. Political liability. Everywhere. Political liability. Political liability. Everywhere, political liability. Political liability. Political liability. Maradona. Play, Maradona, gay, play, Maradona, gay, dribble and score with their hands, dribble and score with their hands,
Hello guys,
dribble
Assalamualaikum.
and score with their hands. Everybody,
Hello,
Maradona.
Assalamualaikum guys. क्या हाल है?
Everyone,
double
Maradona. Everybody, Maradona. Play Maradona game. Play Maradona game.
guys, क्या हाल है?
Dribble and score with their hands. 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 Everywhere, political liability. Political liability. Everywhere, political liability. Political liability. Political liability. Everywhere, political liability. See the government, political liability. See the government, political liability. Political liability. Our commissioners, political liability. Our councillors, political liability. Our ministers, political liability. House of Rep, political liability. Senators, political liability. They are sharing our money. They share our money every day. Political liability everywhere. Political liability. Wardrobe money. Transportation money. Wardrobe money. Transportation money. Everyday political liability. Sharing our money. Everyday political liability. Sharing our money. Wardrobe money. Transport money. Feeding money. They don't go to market. They don't go to market. Everything they supply. Everything by supply. Everything by supply. Political liability. Political liability. Political liability. They don't go to market. They don't go to market. Political liability. Political liability. Our leaders, political liability. They go market. They don't know the cost of materials. liability. Everyone political liability. Everywhere political liability. Political liability. Thank you. Political liability. Our leaders, political liability. They don't go to market. They don't know the price of commodities. They don't go to market. They don't know the price of commodities. All they do, they supply them. They supply them all the commodities. They supply them all the food items. Political liability. Political liability. All our leaders, political liability. Political liability. They don't know that we are suffering. They don't know that we are suffering because they don't go to market, because they don't know the cost of items. They don't know the cost of commodities. Political liability. Everywhere political liability. Political liability. Political liability. They pay them for wardrobe. They pay them for wardrobe. They pay them for everything. Political liability. Our leaders, political liability. They don't know what is happening in our society because they don't go to market. They don't go to hospital. Everything is by appointment. Everything is there for them. They have free doctor. They have free food. They have free accommodation. Everything, they supply them. They have full security. 24/7 security. Our children have no security. Our mothers have no security. Our fathers have no security. Our youth have no security. Political liability. Political liability. Our leaders, political liability. International liars. International liars. Our leaders, international liars. Our leaders, international liars. Every day, political liars. Political liars. International geopolitics. International geopolitics. International geopolitics. International geopolitics. Embezzling our money. Stifling the economy, stifling the economy, international liability, political liability, international liability, political liability, every political liability, embezzling our money. Thank you for supporting us. Embezzling our money. Political liability. Political liability. From the grassroots government to our presidency. Political liability. Liability in our government. Political liability. Sharing our money. Sharing our money. Siphoning our money. Using ghost name for our money. Open account with ghost names. Open account with ghost name. 1,000 accounts with ghost name. 1,000 accounts with ghost name. Political liability. Political liability. Opening account with ghost name. Opening account with dead body. Opening account with dead people. Political liability. Political liability everywhere. Political liability. Sharing our money. Money that belongs to everybody. Senators are sharing all. House of Reps are sharing all the money that belongs to everybody. Our senators are sharing our money. Our House of Reps are sharing our money. Of Assembly sharing our money. Political liability. Political liability everywhere. Political liability. When you talk, they will mute your video. When you say something, they will ban you. Political liability everywhere. Political liability in our kitchen. Political liability. Political liability. International geopolitics. International geopolitics. International geopolitics. International geopolitics. International geopolitics in our kitchen. International geopolitics in our houses. International geopolitics in our government. International geopolitics. Political liability. Political liability everywhere. Political liability. Political liability everywhere political liability, political liability, political liability, everywhere political liability, sharing our money, embezzling our money, stifling the economy, stifling the economy, stifling the economy, political liability, political liability, everywhere political liability, political liability, sharing our money, sharing money that belongs to everybody, every day, every second, every day, every minute, political liability, political liability, sharing our money, sharing our money, money that belongs to our mothers, money that belongs to our fathers, money that belongs to our children. They are sharing every day. They are sharing every day. They are sharing every week. They are sharing every month. Political liability. Political liability. Political liability. Our sister government, political liability. Opposition party, political liability. Taking bribe every day. Giving bribe every day. Just give me 2,000 votes. Give me 2,000 votes. Give me 3,000 votes. Give me 4,000 votes. Give me 15,000 votes. Just give me 20,000 votes. Political liability. Political liars. Political liars. Every second they are telling lies. Every minute they are telling lies. Every day they are telling lies. Every month they are telling lies. Every year they are telling lies. Political liability. Political liability. International geopolitics. International geopolitics. They are all Maradona. They are all Maradona. Playing Maradona game. Playing Maradona game. They dribble and score with their hands. They dribble and score with their hands. International Maradona. International liability. International geopolitics. international liability, political liability, political liability in the seat of government, in the seat of government, political liability, political liability, everywhere political liability, sharing our money, sharing our money, sharing our money every day, political liability, international liar, international liar, sharing our money, sharing money that belongs to our mothers, sharing money that belongs to our fathers, sharing money that belongs to our children, international liar, international liar, political liability, political liability, political liability, our seat of government, our presidency, our presidency, political liability, House of Senate, House of Rep, House of Assembly, political liabilities, political liabilities, sharing our money every day, sharing our money every day, political liability, political liability, political our liabilities, they are our political liabilities, political liabilities. Thank you. Political liabilities. Dance with me. Political liabilities. Our senators' political liabilities. Our senators' political liabilities. As of Rep, politicals, our political liabilities. Yes, political liability. Political liability. Political liability. Political liability. Political liability. Political liability. Thank you. Political liability. Our leaders, political liability. Our leaders, political liability. Thank you. Political liabilities. Political liabilities. Our leaders, political liabilities. Everywhere, everywhere. Political liability. Political liability. Political liability. Political liabilities. Political liabilities. Political liabilities. Political liability. See the government, political liability, political liability. Our senators, political liability. House of Rep, House of Rep, House of Rep, political liability, political liability. Everywhere, everywhere, political liability, political liability. Sharing our money,
Oh, that's funny.
sharing our money,
Becky sauce.
embezzling our money,
Becky sauce.
embezzling our money.
Becky sauce.
Yes, international liability, international liability. Thank you. Yes, international liability, 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 everywhere, international liability, international liability, sharing our money, embezzling our money, stifling the economy, stifling the economy, stifling the economy, sharing our money amongst themselves, sharing our money amongst themselves, political liability, political liability, everywhere, political liability, from grassroots to presidency, from grassroots to presidency, political liability, political liability, from grassroots to presidency, sharing our money, embezzling our money, stifling the economy. There is no even development. There is no even development. All they know is to share our money. All they know is to embezzle our money. All they know stifling the economy. Political liability, political liability, political liability, international politics, international geopolitics, in the system of our government. Everybody, international liar, international liar, international liar, international liar, political, political, international geopolitics, international geopolitics in our government, political liability, political liability, everywhere political liability, political liability, political liability. Maradona play Maradona game, dribble and score, dribble and score with their hands, dribble and score with their hands. Maradona play Maradona game, political liability, political liability, political liability in the system of our government, in the system of our government. Everybody, political liability, political liability. That is why we are fighting every day. That is why we are fighting every day. That is why we are killing every day. Political liability, political liars, international liars, political liability in the seat of government, in the House of Reps, all our senators, political liability, political liability, senators, political liability, mamas and papas, our senators, mamas and papas, political liability. They don't want the youth to grow. The young shall grow is not written. They will like to be in office 40 years, 50 years, 60 years. Our senators, 60 years in office, 50 years, 70 years in office. Our senators, 70 years in office. Political liability, political liability, political liability, political liability. No more democracy, no more democracy for 5 decades. When you are in government for 6 decades, no more democracy, no more democracy. Thank you for appreciating what we are doing. No more democracy, autocratic, autocratic, totalitarian, totalitarian, Mr. Dictator, Mr. Dictator, Mr. Dictator. You are in government for 4 decades, 5 decades, Mr. Dictator, Mr. Dictator. No more democracy. No more democracy. Government of the people. Back for 4 decades. When they are for fights, a dictator. There is no more democracy for people. But you are in government for free. You are a dictator. You are a totalitarian. You are a dictator. Anarchy, anarchy. No more democracy. Liability, political liability. 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 Everywhere. Political liability. Political liability. Everywhere. Everywhere. Political liability. Sharing our money. Siphon the economy. Siphon the economy. Embezzle all the money. International embezzler. International embezzler. International liar. International liar. In our seat of government. International liar. Political liability. Political liability. Political liability. Our children are dying. Our mothers are dying. Our fathers are dying. After embezzling all the money. After siphoning the economy. After siphoning the economy. No money is left. No money is left in our bank. After siphoning the economy. After sharing our money. No money is left in the treasury. Political liability. Sharing our money. The economy. Our children are dying of malnutrition. Our children are dying of malnutrition. Our children are dying. Man everywhere. Malnutrition everywhere. Killing our children. Our children are dying every day because of malnutrition. liability. Our leaders, political everywhere, political liability. No security. Security is only for themselves. Security is only for themselves. House of government, only security. In the house of government, senators are secured. House of reps are secured. The presidency secured. Anything outside that, they are killing us every day in the market, in the mall, seaport, airport, on the street. We are men, we are men, no security.